Hello everybody, my name is Christian, and Star Rail is slowly getting up there in terms of characters. Star Rail is already past 50 unique characters, and after the most recent update, should be closer to 60 than not. Out of those 50 plus, there's a surprising amount of characters that are competitive and can be used to beat some of the hardest content in the game. We have Firefly or Boot Hill for break teams, Kafka still being the queen of true DOT, Acheron being a destruction character disguised as Nihility. There are even more fun lineups that still work and serve their purpose as well, like the Topaz and Ratio follow-up teams, or Jingliu/Dan Heng hypercarry. The beauty of Star Rail combat is, you're never too limited in what you can do. You can mix and match countless completely different characters to make the best lineups that you can. So now, what if you couldn't? Similar to the nations in Genshin, many of the characters in Star Rail identify with some sort of faction or planet. We have the Xianzhou Alliance, Jarilo-VI, Penacony, and a few smaller ones like the Astral Express or the Stellaron Hunters. Using only characters from each respective faction, what is the best team lineup you could construct for each? This is a question I was thinking about late at night a while back, so today, I'll be looking through every faction and trying to construct the best lineup I can for each. At the end of the video, I'm going to be ranking each lineup and each faction, and we're going to see which faction comes out on top with the best lineups you can make, or maybe just the most impressive overall lineups you can make. Some places just have more characters, and that could mean a lot. With that said, let's get into it. Also, if you enjoy this content, make sure to like and subscribe. Over 80% of my viewers aren't subbed, so please help a brother out, okay? Back to the video. Alright, so I know no one wants to hear rules for what is essentially a mental exercise, but it's probably for the best that we establish a few things. First thing of note, the smaller factions in the game will be split up by where they first appear. Characters from the cosmos like Argenti and Acheron have no true faction, but only those two in Dr. Ratio isn't enough to build a whole team comp. They're also all pretty good characters, so it feels like a bit of a waste to have these smaller factions not be able to participate. Instead, I'll be saying that where characters first appear in the story will be where they belong to. For the majority of you who don't care enough to think about that, I'll go through the list right now. Starting with the Astral Express, all characters will belong to the Herta space station. It's where they first appear, and Herta space station desperately needs some help. Kafka and Silverwolf will also belong to Herta space station, as will Dr. Ratio. Now I know Argenti by this logic would belong to the Astral Express, and that also means that he would belong to the Herta space station, but he's never even stepped one foot on that thing. Not to mention, his first true story appearance was on Penacony, whereas his time on the Express was a companion story. You can pick either, but I'm gonna say Argenti is on the Penacony team for the time being. Next up is Jarilo, and technically Gweniphen appears there first for Ethereum Wars? But yeah, we're not counting that since she is stated to be a Luofu resident. Jarilo does, however, get to add Topaz, since her first major appearance was there for a continuance. Outside of Topaz though, Jarilo is going to have to work with the character seen in Belobog, and that's it. Next up is Luofu. Already a strong contender considering the sheer amount of characters they have, and it only gets better with the addition of Blade. The Luofu doesn't get anyone else, but looking at that roster, do they really need anyone else? The last planet we have is Penacony. Penacony has a pretty small default roster, with the wiki only listing 6 characters as part of the planet. Luckily, Penacony gets some pretty good reinforcements. Penacony not only gets the IPC duo of Aventurine and Jade, but also Acheron and Firefly to bolster their ranks. They also do get Argenti as mentioned before. The final thing I want to mention is I'll be mainly building teams in the context of Memory of Chaos. I will be trying to make pure fiction and apocalyptic shadow teams as I can as well, but if there just isn't a good team to be made, then what's the point of bringing it up? It also applies the same if the team I've already listed is probably the best team for one of those as well. Finally, with all of those semantics out of the way, we can begin our team building. There's no better place to start than where the journey began, the Herta space station. For this list, we will be assuming all 4-star characters are E6 and all 5 stars are E0. With some specific exceptions if it's the difference between a team comp working or not. Looking at you, Acheron. In terms of characters from the Herta space station and the additions we added, the first thing that stands out is the possibility of a break team. We get Ron May as our first Harmony, and the Harmony MC with Super Break. Yes, Trailblazer and March get access to all of their forms. I'm not doing more semantics, this is my list, I'm sorry. For the first team comp, I think the best possible lineup would consist of a Break Himiko, Harmony MC, Ron May, and unfortunately, without Preservation Trailblazer, our only sustain option is March 7th. Not horrible, but certainly not the best either. We could also run a follow-up attack team with the characters present, but I think it would perform worse than this. The follow-up attack team would be Dr. Ratio, March 7th Hunt, probably Asta, and then Preservation Trailblazer as your sustain. This team has a strong basis with March and Ratio together, but lacks the necessary support to really push it over the edge. I personally feel the Super Break team would be more effective, but that's just me. The Herta space station does have a good setup to make a pure fiction team as well. We have Himiko and Herta, which are the keys to any good pure fiction run, Ron May to buff them up, and March is gonna be there doing her best. And hey, that's what matters. Right? Moving on to the next planet in line, Jarilo-VI is a bit weird. There's a fair few characters, but most don't really work together too well. Sampo without Kafka really won't be too helpful, and Luca and Pela don't inflict damage over time to begin with. Hook is unfortunately useless, and Natasha is outclassed by Lynx and Japard in my opinion. In terms of damage characters, we're really only looking at Zila, Clara, and technically Serval, but any team you make with the other two should be better than Serval being the main DPS. The saving grace of Belobog is the fact it has Bronya, an incredible Harmony character capable of massively increasing your damage, and Topaz. Topaz being another great follow-up character enables us to construct a halfway decent follow-up attack team, with her and Clara being the cornerstones of it. Alongside those two, you can choose Japard or Lynx, and I don't think it'll matter too much either way. I think shields are pretty useful all things considered, but having a cleanse on Lynx is very nice to say the least, and could be essential at certain points. The last slot is a bit tricky. The defense shred of Pela is incredibly nice for two characters who are gonna constantly be putting out attacks, but Bronya's buffs are hard to argue against. I leave it up to your discretion, but I'll say Bronya for the time being due to how nice that crit damage buff on Clara can be. We do actually have the ability to make another team comp here, starring Zila as the main DPS. Now Zila is a character who benefits immensely from her fellow Quantum girlies, but we can make something work here. Immediately, we will be adding Bronya to this team. Just like the last team, crit damage increase for a character like Zila is invaluable to say the least. For your sustain, if you're going against Quantum weak characters, I would definitely pick Lynx, since Quantum Break is so powerful. Otherwise, you can take Japard or Lynx. Without many good options, the last slot pretty easily goes to Pela in my opinion. Her defense shred will be incredibly helpful to get rid of weaker enemies, allowing Zila to activate her resurgence ability. I'm gonna be honest, there are not many ways to put together a decent pure fiction or apocalyptic shadow team that would be that different from these, but I can tell you, they're both gonna have Clara as your main DPS more than likely. Now let's get out of here so Bronya and Zila can go back to making out. Next up, the Xianzhou Alliance. I'm not gonna waste your time with any build up. One of the best teams you can make here without any doubt is Blade, Jingliu, Hua, and Ting Yun. This is a very strong team that all play into each other extremely well. Jingliu will constantly trigger Blade's follow-up attack for stealing health. Ting Yun and Hua can constantly keep Jingliu's energy topped off, so she never really has to leave her enhanced state. And Jingliu will benefit immensely from the raw damage boost given by Ting Yun. This isn't a perfect lineup, but still one of the best for the entire video so far, and one of the few that actually has every part it's looking for. Now looking at some other possibilities, the Xianzhou has Dan Heng Il, Jing Yuan, Yun Li, and now Fei Xiao as powerful lead damage dealers. Plenty of options here, but not all are going to have their best support options readily available. Starting with Jing Yuan, he does actually get some of his best characters. Ting Yun will be his best available support on the Luofu, and while Hua and Fu Xuan are both very solid options, I think Hua giving energy can be good to make up for not having that additional damage Jing Yuan gets from a Bronya or a Sparkle. Both these characters do have their advantages, but again, I'm probably going to be leaning Hua this time around. The last slot here is once again tricky, since the Luofu harmony besides Ting Yun is, lacking, to say the least. My personal choice in this scenario might actually be Xianzhou. His ability to increase ultimate damage when both Ting Yun and Hua will be pumping Jing Yuan full of energy should honestly be a pretty nice compliment to the team. This team is disgusting in terms of skill points though, so keep that in mind, but if you don't talk about it, I'm not going to talk about it. Alright, I need to try and speed this up at least a little bit. We have a whole other planet and a ranking to get through, so lock in. If building around Fei Xiao as your primary damage dealer, you'll want Moze for his follow-up attack that can contribute to her ultimate. Hua won't be too helpful here, so I would probably opt for Fu Xuan, as her crit rate increase is helpful in every single scenario. Lastly, the 4th slot is kind of a bust here since you rarely, if ever, want 3 attackers. Ting Yun's massive energy regen is ultimately worthless for Fei Xiao, so you're going to be losing worth there. Your best bet in this case might actually be Hanya. Hun characters can only attack one character at a time to begin with, so the skill point regeneration would come up pretty often, as well as her damage and speed boost being constantly utilized. As for Yunli and Dan Heng Il, both teams once again need Ting Yun. Both can use Hua, but for Imbibitor Lune, I might actually recommend Luocha. He's far more SP friendly, and this is already going to be a lot of skill points. There's still no good Sparkle replacements for the Luofu, so in both cases, your last character for the double harmony setup should once again probably be Hanya. Yukong just isn't reliable enough, and especially for Dan Heng, those extra skill points are gonna matter to keep him doing max damage. I think this might genuinely be the most anyone has ever talked about Hanya outside of her first week, I gotta be honest. Finally, we have made it to Penacony. And I have some interesting news. The team here is pretty easy to construct because, Jesus Christ, there are not great team options here, but at the very least, there are very good characters. This is also where we finally get the first exception to all 5 stars being E0. Acheron typically requires 2 Nihility characters to unlock her full potential. If you have an E2 Acheron, however, this requirement is lowered to 1. This allows players to create the broken team of Acheron, Black Swan, Sparkle, and Aventurine. For the end of video rankings, this team will not be counted at all, because this is easily one of the best teams in the entire game, much less the video. Without this team, we enter a bit of a problem area. Boot Hill and Firefly are both fine, but really need Harmony Trailblazer to go from good to great characters. Gallagher is an amazing sustain, but an ultimately poor damage dealer. Misha just sucks, and Acheron without her E2 is nowhere near as good. Technically there's Black Swan, but once again, a severe lack of Nihility or Kafka leads to many Nihility characters not being the strongest options as primary attackers. This then lands us with the only competent damage dealing option left, Jade. The best team comp to build around Jade will consist of her, Aventurine because he's broken, Robin to enhance the team and gain free energy from the follow-up attacks, and lastly Sparkle to give Jade that extra oomph that she needs. Without having another follow-up unit, Jade is going to need that damage increase to remain even remotely competitive against a lot of enemies. While this is a coherent team lineup, Jade isn't built to be a hyper carry, she's built as a sub DPS. She needs that extra follow-up attack alongside Robin to really make her shine. Unfortunately, the other options were just far worse and had even less synergy. For what it's worth, this is also probably the ideal lineup to bring into pure fiction. As for Apocalyptic Shadow, oh boy, let's not talk about that one. Alright, hey guys, so while recording, I actually forgot Argenti belongs to Penacony in this scenario, so I've quickly written another part of the script, so let's quickly go through his team comp since it's actually decent. With Argenti as your primary damage dealer, you'll definitely want Sparkle to maximize his damage output. Alongside him, you should of course be bringing Aventurine, since he's the best sustain in the game right now. The last slot is pretty easily going to go to Robin here. The raw damage increase is so beneficial to any character that I think it warrants not bringing another DPS. Argenti is definitely going to be missing out on a lot of extra damage from his ultimate, But the collective buffs between these two characters, plus the extra damage provided by Aventurine, should help alleviate that at least a little bit. And with that, that brings us to the end of the list. So now we can finally look and decide what planet had the overall best characters and best team compositions. So first off, chilling at the bottom of the list for sure is Penacony and Jarilo. Both of the follow-up teams are passable, and they have the core elements to really be decent, but are lacking that last piece that they truly need to be dominant. Robin on the Jarilo team, or Topaz on the Penacony team, would complete them perfectly, but that's just not how it works. I also don't think the team with Zila as the lead is going to be strong enough compared to some of the other ones coming up, so it gets shafted as well. The Argenti team for Penacony is honestly pretty powerful, all things considered, but I just don't think it matches up with the other two planets. I'm going to have to say currently that Jarilo is pretty solidly at the bottom. The sustain really doesn't do much for them, and the support characters, while good, are pretty outclassed by newer ones. So now, it comes down to the battle between the Herta space station and the Xianzhou alliance. Truthfully, I do want to give it to the space station due to just how powerful Super Break is and how good Himiko can be using it alongside a Ron May boost. Hey, what's up guys? So, it's actually been weeks since I initially recorded this, and initially I chose the Xianzhou as the winners of the video. I would like to rectify that before you have to hear it. I'm gonna get rid of that completely. The Xianzhou has a lot of great team options, and with the addition of Ling Sha in the game, who was not there when I had written this, it makes Fei Xiao work even better now. My problem is that even though the Xianzhou has multiple coherent lineups compared to the Astral Express, the Himiko Super Break is genuinely just such an amazing team that just works super well compared to a lot of other ones. It kinda sucks to give it to the Astral Express Herta space station when they needed so much help and you had to merge them. The thing is though, is that that's how I did the video, and that is probably the best lineup we talked about today, so... But yeah, so we're probably gonna give it to the Herta space station, but for what it's worth, Xianzhou has probably 4 good lineups that I could see reasonably doing well, and honestly, that's pretty impressive. Anyway, back to the video, bye! Hanya, while not an incredible support mind you, could at least partially fill gaps in team lineups better than other characters could in my opinion. And that is essentially the reason that the Luofu got to take the win, so great job, Hanya! Maybe the writers will give you even more screen time now!
Like that's ever gonna happen.
Yeah, I don't know who I'm kidding with that one. And with the rankings done, that ends my video. This was a lot of fun to make, and was a pretty good thinking exercise trying to figure out the next best character for many of these team lineups. Some places like Penacony really didn't have another option, so you had to work with what you had, whereas because of how useful a high-speed Asta can be, there would be incentive to use her in certain team comps. The same goes for using Zhao Cho instead of another Harmony unit for the Jing Yuan team. If you guys play any other gacha games at home, I would highly recommend trying this out. It can be a lot of fun, and hey, maybe you can even try out a new lineup and see how it actually runs in game. That's going to be all for me, so I hope you guys enjoyed, and I'll see you for the next video. Bye bye!